This is Horsepower Heritage. I'm Maurice Merrick. Thanks for joining me once again, and if you're a Porsche fan, you're going to love this episode. Recently, I got a call from my pal Tony Principe of Finish Line Auto Club, which is an exclusive collector car storage business here in Southern California. But it's not just a place to keep your car, it's also a place for social gatherings and events. They have cars and coffee at their various locations. Always a good time. Anyway, Tony called to ask me if I'd like to host an event at their newest location in Calabasas with Peter Nahm, the founder of Gunther Werks, and veteran racing driver Patrick Long. And of course, the answer was yes. So we recorded this episode in front of a live audience, and the purple car that you see on the cover art of this episode was there too. It's the very impressive Gunther Werks GWX, and you'll hear all about it. Tony joins me as a co-host on this one, so I hope you enjoy it. Here's my conversation with Peter Nahm and Patrick Long.
This is the inaugural speaker series at Finish Line Calabasas, and we're really excited to have you guys here. It's a special night. We've been doing the speaker series now for about 5 years, primarily down in Orange County at our facility down there. And the speaker series is our opportunity to really showcase people at the highest level in the automotive world, from car designers, motorsports champions, collectors, and everybody in between. And it really gives a behind the curtain look. Peter Nahm is with Gunther Werks and Vorsteiner, which is a wheel company and carbon fiber accessory company. And he started this business many years ago, and we're going to get to know Peter. We also, before I introduce our host, we have a real motorsports legend in the house, and I have the pleasure of introducing a good friend of mine, Patrick Long, who's had a very, very esteemed career in motorsports. Patrick is the only American driver for Porsche factory racing at the highest level, has multiple wins at Le Mans, 24 Hours Le Mans, Daytona, Sebring, Rolex, a couple of sports car ALMS championships and titles, and is just the fastest guy. And I can tell you from personal experience going around the track with him, it's the equivalent of riding in a fighter plane through the Grand Canyon. It's like, exhilarating. And but not only has he done that, he's retired from that career, but he's also a Porsche brand representative. He has a company, or I should say art installation, if you will, called Lifticult, which is, you see some of the pictures inside the clubhouse there, but it is the world premiere event for air-cooled Porsches all around the world. And he takes and curates just an unbelievable show. He's a great guy. And why that ties in is he's also a test driver for Peter and Gunther Werks. So when Peter builds these beautiful cars and gets them all done, then he hands them over to Pat, and Pat goes and rings them out on the canyons and the track and brings them back and gives them a list. And I think every time probably that list gets shorter, I would imagine.
No, it gets longer.
Oh, it does, okay. But sometimes we don't think about when we buy a car, what it actually goes through. So when we get it and we feel like we're these really talented drivers because there's so many tools and stuff, there's a lot that goes behind that. I want to introduce Maurice Merrick with Horsepower Heritage. We've hosted a speaker series before. Does a fantastic job of really digging deep into the backgrounds of our speakers. He's interviewed some of the most fascinating people in the industry. And I think you'll see tonight how he shines in the interview process.
No pressure.
And the questioning. No, not at all. And so I'm really excited about introducing the gang and Peter, and maybe a warm welcome for Peter and Maurice, and we'll get this thing started. And so, welcome. Maurice, maybe you can kick us off.
Thank you, Tony. Well, Peter, your father's disappointed in you, if I'm not mistaken.
Mm-hmm. Well, yeah, if you're growing up with Asian parents, you have something called LED, which is lawyer, engineer, and doctor. So if you're not one of those three, you're not really working. So my dad still thinks I sell tires or owns a body shop. So he sends his friends over to my shop that have damage or tire repair on their Toyota Camry, and I'm like, Dad, I don't do that. So I'm still trying to explain what I do, but he doesn't really understand it.
But you started in, you had a finance degree. You have a finance degree, and things weren't really conducive to that career path at the time. And you kind of had a wild vision of maybe I need to get more into the aftermarket. And you had this fantastic confluence where carbon fiber was kind of a new thing, right?
It was cutting edge because it was mainly used in aerospace and Formula One cars. So it just started hitting mainstream where it was being applied to car parts. But I never intended on actually starting a career in this field. I actually did this as a hobby because I was unemployed. And a couple of years later, I was like, oh my God, this is my full-time job. So it started as a passion, and then it sort of turned accidentally into a job.
And that hobby became Vorsteiner.
Correct.
And what was your first product at Vorsteiner?
It was a carbon fiber hood for a BMW.
Okay. Yeah, I know you're a BMW guy originally.
I used to be.
Yeah, used to be.
Yeah.
You've converted.
And maybe going back. Or maybe not.
The classics, yeah, but not the new stuff.
Right,
it's all
right.
refrigerators on wheels. I was like buying these parts, and I thought, you know what? These are very expensive, and they're not very well made. I think I can make them better. So I recruited a composite technician that worked at Boeing, and he was my first employee, and that's how it just sort of built from there.
You've learned so much during that period. Talk about laying up carbon, because it's not easy, and there are a couple of different processes, but you managed to nail it.
Yeah, it's really a black art, you know, and there's like not just a technical component, but an artistic component to it to make sure that it still looks beautiful when you're done. It's not just about the structure and the strength. And you cannot go on Craigslist and, you know, Facebook and look for these composite technicians. They're not usually, you don't have these, you know, kind of job descriptions out there. They're usually working for Boeing or for Formula One. So the challenge I had was actually, I had to teach people from scratch. Like my first carbon laminator was a guy that was trying to sell me oranges out of his shopping cart. And I said, do you want a job? He's like, sure. And okay. And then we just kind of developed and honed the skill, and that's how it just sort of grew from there.
So you were learning as you went, this whole venture.
On-the-job training, yeah.
Yeah. Scary.
Yeah. There was no book about the stuff, or there was no YouTube back then where I could learn how to do these things. So we were like literally writing the book, and I was literally introducing aerospace composite technology into the automotive world because no one else was applying that level of carbon fiber production back then, except for aerospace or Formula One. So we were like figuring out how to make these things with the new processes and materials that, like a company called AirTech International, they supply all the vacuum bagging materials for Boeing. And I was like the only automotive client they had back then because everyone was all aerospace.
So you were really ahead of the game.
We were back then like quite ahead of the game, you know.
Did you get pushback from your friends, your family, potential investors?
Back then I didn't have investors. So definitely for sure, yeah. Like most of my friends that graduated were all in Wall Street working banking jobs, and here I was, you know, fooling around with car parts in California. So.
Was there a moment at Vorsteiner where you realized, okay, this is a real business, I'm bringing in real money, the product line is expanding? Mm-hmm. Was there a time when you kind of felt like you'd hit?
Yeah, I think there was a time where 7-8 years in the business, when we started doing $100,000 in revenue per month, that's when I was like, okay, this is a real business. This is no longer just a mom and pop hobby business.
Hey guys, I want to take a quick break to say if you enjoy Horsepower Heritage, there are a few ways you can support the show. Go to buymeacoffee.com/HP Heritage and become a patron. There's a link in the show notes. You can make a one-time donation or you can support the show monthly. It's easy, and for the price of a latte, you can help me continue to bring you more of the people and stories behind the machines. You can also leave 5 stars and a review on Apple Podcasts or Spotify because that helps new listeners discover discover the show. Thanks for your support, and now back to the show.
So how do you go from aftermarket body parts, wheels, to a full car?
So roughly about 10 years ago, because Rothsport was making a lot of components for like high-end sports cars like McLaren, Lamborghini, Porsche, BMW, Ferrari. And I noticed there was a phase where like roughly 9-10 years ago, the cars transitioned from the analog into digital. And the early digital cars were still like a hybrid of analog and digital. So they were still fun to drive, right? And then there was a phase where there was too much technology put into these cars, and they became too computerized, and they were like essentially self-driving, and they became very, very numb. They became heavier and more powerful, but less engaging to drive. And I started getting bored of these cars, you know, because I got to drive all these cars because we were working on them. And I said, you know what, we're moving away from building drivers' cars. Porsche was honestly the only brand, in my opinion, that was still building a driver's car, like the modern day GT3, GT2s. They were still not quite that diluted yet, but BMW had started a long time ago. Going into that phase, Mercedes, the same thing. And I wanted to build a car that was analog, that had modern technology injected in a way where it enhances that analog driving experience, not masks it, you know. And it has the performance of a modern sports car, but it has all of the emotional driving elements of an analog car.
And so that was the thinking behind you settling on the 993 as the chosen platform?
I've always had an affinity to Porsches, and there's a very special enthusiast market for Porsche that BMW, Audi, Mercedes, Ferrari does not have. You know, that's the reason why Pat has a successful show, because he has such a captivating audience. And I felt like it was a good platform because we had the right consumer demanding something that was based on a Porsche 911. If I based it on a BMW, there's honestly a price ceiling that you hit where BMW owners are like, there's a limit where they won't pay over, no matter how good the car is.
BMWs also kind of get used up, you know? I mean, there's a certain point where people just move on from them, whereas Porsches become an heirloom to people. Mm-hmm. There's very few cars that can claim that title.
Absolutely. I mean, you don't see a Luft of BMW or a Luft of a Mercedes, right, or a Ferrari version of Luft, right? There is none.
Why a 993 versus going to a 930 turbo or an early 911 or 991?
Mainly because the 993 was the last air-cooled 911, and historically, the 993 was supposed to be the first water-cooled car. And Porsche, on the previous models, all the way up to 964, had made very little updates to the 911 because essentially they were planning on killing it and bringing the
928
to replace the 911. So they did not invest in the chassis and the development of the cars for various generations. And then the 993 was the first one where they actually made aerodynamic improvements, where the headlight is tilted back instead of more upright. You have multi-link rear suspension. And they kind of invested in the 993 platform to make this the first water-cooled car. But back then they had financial trouble and they could not productionize the water-cooled engine. So they stuck the old air-cooled engine back in, so it has modern chassis updates with the spirit of an air-cooled motor, you know? So
right.
It's got best of both worlds.
Yeah, the platform itself is sort of, it's a bridge. The 993 is a bridge between the old and the new. Mm-hmm. It's a mixture. It's interesting you say, you know, Porsche did have financial troubles. It's hard for us to remember that these days with Porsche being so popular and doing so well. But in fact, they were kind of on the ropes. It was tentative for quite a while. And really what saved them was the SUV.
Yeah, well, you know? The Boxster first.
Right.
Well, Boxster, yep, yeah. Absolutely.
Yeah,
absolutely.
And then the Cayenne.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
So when you take one of these, how far, because I think everybody would be curious, when you take one of these cars that's not been modified yet, how far do you take it down to the chassis? Like, I know you replaced the fenders and all the body parts with carbon fiber. How far do you take it down and then rebuild it? What's it look like?
The only thing we have original is the basic chassis, but part of the frame is also modified, like the rear quarter panels, which is originally steel. We would cut those off and graft in carbon fiber, and the roof panel is typically steel, comes out of the factory that way, and we would graft out the steel skin and graft in the carbon fiber. So everything outside of the chassis, the original steel chassis, is modified.
What kind of weight savings are we talking about there versus the factory car?
Okay, so this model is also naturally aspirated, but this has a slide valve motor, so it makes like 450, 55 horsepower.
And this is the GWX.
Yeah. So this model, for example, that you see, we're saving a little over 600 pounds over the factory car.
Very impressive.
Yeah. And how many horses is this?
About 450.
450.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah,
nice.
And it's little over 2,500 pounds.
Wow.
So,
and a normal would be about 3,500 or so, 3,400.
33, 35, yeah, depends on.
And the weight savings isn't just about the bodywork, it extends into the cabin, right?
Correct. Like one of the things that save quite a bit of weight is the undercoating that's on all the original air-cooled Porsches.
Something we don't think about.
Yeah. That rubbery texture that it feels like gum, and it's very orange peely. That's very, very old technology to protect the chassis from rust and so forth. We strip all that out. Just taking that coating off is 80 to 100 pounds, right?
And what's great too, Peter, is that you can do things that Porsche themselves cannot do because of the business model, right?
Right. I'm sure Porsche is more than capable of producing a car like this if they wanted to, but because they are such a large company, and also because they're subject to homologations and emissions, their hands are tied. But had Porsche wanted to do this, I'm sure they could probably do a better job than us.
Does Porsche get involved with what you're building and say, hey, you're building something that's on our platform? Do they have some restrictions on what you do and how you advertise and market what this vehicle is?
Yeah, without getting into details,
right.
I have a non-disclosure that I have to honor, but yeah, we've had people come over from the factory, and they are very particular about the use of the badge, the placement of the badge, and making sure that we are retaining the factory chassis, because there are some other companies that will Frankenstein their chassis and literally weld in a new front, a new rear, and the only thing they use is the middle of the chassis, so it's no longer a Porsche chassis anymore. And they're making sure that we retain the original chassis, and they came by and actually looked at all our cars, looked it up on the lift, looked at it before it went in the paint booth to make sure we're keeping the original structure of the chassis. Because as soon as you start modifying the chassis, you're categorized as a car manufacturer, and there's a lot of legal things that open up once you start doing that Porsche are not comfortable with.
I'd be curious to know, when you build these and then somebody like Pat takes these out and does this, how that affects your engineering and how you modify the cars. Would you mind coming up and maybe talk a little bit about that and what you do?
So the funny story is, when I first started this company 8.5 years ago, I went on a trip to visit F1 with Pirelli, and Pat and I were invited to go to F1 Silverstone, and that's the first time I met him. And I was literally watching the camera of my company when I was in the UK, watching them play model the car, and Pat was like right next to me, listening to all this, and I told him this idea, and he thought I was crazy. But yeah, Pat was there from the beginning.
Pat, you can just hold the mic up, or if you want to clip it on. All right, so you said something very interesting to me earlier. Pat, I know you're a no-nonsense kind of guy. When Peter brought you on, what was your objective? Your objective, not his objective, right?
The first objective was to go fast. Peter and his team called and said, we want to go to Laguna Seca and set a lap record. And that comes naturally. I spent 25 of my first 30 years trying to set lap records, and I just asked more questions. It was my off time. I was still racing full time at that period in my life, and I wanted to know more. I knew Peter from the trip that he acknowledged when we were having fun and spending time at the bar, but I wanted to know if we were going to go set a lap record, who were the key people involved? And that was the first thing that intrigued me. Jeff Gamroth on the engine side was somebody that I knew and trusted from racing. Kerry Eisenhower on the suspension and design. And so quickly I understood that Peter was a great guy, but I didn't know a lot about Peter, and I didn't know a lot about Gunther Werks or his concept, but I knew that he had gone out and brought in the right team. And at that point I was in. But as our relationship grew, he pulled me aside after that successful lap record. I believe we set a record that weekend. And asked me if I'd be willing to experience the car on the street and give him my feedback. And as he alluded to earlier, I'm not short on opinion. I think that I'll acknowledge that by saying that being a professional driver, yes, you have to go fast. Yes, you have to set records and pass the other opponents. But really the majority of the job is breaking down the car. First of all, being able to feel it, and know what it is, but then being able to articulate it to the team and let them then go in and tune the car and understand what the car needs to be better. And that's a great part of not only Peter as a professional side and a competitive side, but he knows and trusts his team. And as a driver, I sat in the car and right away I was sending him text messages about the ergonomics and how the car fit and where the seat was angled. And I give him credit. He probably only listens to half of what I say, but at least he gives me the platform to read him my riot.
That's not true. It's more like 98%.
Was Pat's feedback quite a bit different than feedback you've gotten from other drivers? In other words, did Pat have insights that you weren't getting elsewhere?
Yes, for sure. Because we had two other, development drivers, and Pat is extremely detailed about his feedback. Very, very, down to the microscopic level. And he's not just giving us performance feedback, but he's giving us ergonomic feedback. And you would think him being a Porsche Motorsports race car driver, he's only concerned about how quick the car goes. But he also has a different side where he goes, I don't like race cars on the street. He wants a street car to be like a street car. So he would give us a lot of feedback where our consumers would want on our car. They don't want just a very, very stiff, fast car. And he would give us feedback where this is how I would want my street car to be, and things that we did not expect from a race car driver.
Pat, you know this. There are a lot of performance cars that are just not well road mannered. And how does that translate with Gunther Werks? Because, you've driven everything, right? I know that you probably have memories of cars that just did not satisfy on the road. And obviously being here in Southern California, we have so much traffic. If a car is not right for normal driving, it's immediately apparent, right?
Yeah, style and what you want from an experience of a car is subjective. What you guys are both touching on is that I'm a fan of the brand and of air-cooled cars and of classics. Downstairs is a few of my collection, and it's from 1957 up to the 90s and all air-cooled. But through living as a factory driver, you were always exposed to Porsche's DNA and to their heritage and all the model line. So I became, through osmosis, just a fan of the brand and all the different products. And when you bring something that's 90s era, but with today's technology, I think you can have your cake and eat it. I don't consult exclusively for Gunther Werks. So my job is to get into said car and give the feedback that I believe is what they're looking for. And I think what you want in a modern day air-cooled Porsche is you want to have your cake and eat it. You want to be able to perform on the racetrack and in the canyons and set records, but you also want to be comfortable enough to take this car with your significant other out for a date. And that's really hard to do, and it's very expensive to do. And it's things like damper technology, being able to have a shock that understands what's happening and is alternating its characteristics based on a G sensor under the seat. And it's saying, oh, right now you're loading the wheel at a certain velocity, so I'm going to give you a stiff on-track performance. Or, hey, we're driving around town, there's no lateral G-forces, so I'm going to relax my compression and be compliant and soak up the bumps on the road. So again, it comes back to trusting your team. The driver's the one that gets to tell you everything that's wrong. And then you have to have the right experts that can then convert what the driver's asking for, oftentimes unreasonable, both in timeline and budget. But that goes back to Peter and who he is and what he does and how he applies himself. And I've been out to dinner with this guy, and everything he does is like full bore. So it's fun. It's fun to work for clients like Peter.
Peter, I think I read somewhere that the suspension has 1,000 data points per second that it's analyzing. Is that?
Yeah,
that's incredible.
It's adapting 1,000 times per second.
Wow.
Which is crazy.
Incredible.
Yeah.
Pat, I know you're short on time. You've got another engagement, but one final question, which is, how does a Gunther Werks car compare to a pure racing machine?
I think there's similarities and there's differences. Again, back to this being a street car, originally designed in the 90s, but where they've made advances in lightening the car, in using big brakes, big wheels, big tires. It has a lot of race tendency to it, and it really starts with weight. I mean, 600 pounds, that's a substantial diet for one of these cars when you think about the percentage of it only being, what, around 3,000? You're 3,200. So, you know, it's a huge amount of weight shed. The engine is the heart of the car and the soul of the car. And when you get a naturally aspirated or a turbo that has such amount of usable rev range, but I like RPM. I like a normally aspirated engine that sings and screams. And that's what Jeff Gamroth and the Rothsport guys really worked to develop. But at the same time, you know, you need a car that shifts well. You're a sum of all parts. It's a recipe, right? So you can have all the highlights, but if they don't work together, then it doesn't give you that experience as a driver. So I would say, in summary, has a lot of race-inspired feeling to it. But when you look at the color, when you look at the interior up close, you understand that this is a fit and finish that's much different than a crude race car that's all stripped down and very bare and pretty rudimentary.
One of the things that I think there's a fallacy, a lot of people buy cars because they have more horsepower. Oh, if this one's got more horsepower, I got to chase it, right? Porsche's always done a great job of less horsepower, lighter cars, right? So here's a 400-something horsepower car, right, that can outperform probably a lot of 800, 900 horsepower. Will you touch on just the difference, that kind of that fallacy of horsepower doesn't always equal speed and traction and control, right? Porsche's mastered that.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not an engineer, but I understand enough to be dangerous. And I think back to physics class, we understand acceleration, right? It has to do with weight. It has to do with power. But I think other than acceleration and beating numbers of 0 to 60 or what we're going to read in the magazines or online, it's how everything responds. And if you think about weight from a handling standpoint, from a tactile standpoint, from an emotional standpoint, I love lightweight cars because they move around, they dance, they're recoverable, and ultimately your 4 contact patches, the tires, it's like paws on an animal's foot. No matter how strong the animal is, if it doesn't have traction, then it doesn't really work. Or if you overload one of the limbs or one of the tires or corners of the car, then that tire is not going to function. It has a breakaway point and it's not going to give you more performance. So weight is a huge part of acceleration. As you made a great point, Tony, no matter what horsepower you have, the next question should be, how much does that thing weigh? And again, it comes back to cost. It comes back to materials. It's very difficult to mold carbon fiber and to make magnesium and things like that. So yeah, it's an integral part of the experience as well as the performance. It's a work in progress always for me. I'm never satisfied. I'm never happy, but I love these cars. I'm proud of having a very small part of it when it comes to being one of Peter's consultants, and he gives me the latitude to give him all types of feedback. So yeah, big fan of this car and the driving experience. And it ultimately comes back to emotion for me. I'm past my days of being a pro racing driver or, setting records in races. I want to go out on the street and have a good time. And no matter what the data and the facts are, I always tell people, they ask me, oh, I'm going to buy this car. Should I buy this car? What's this car all about? And I always tell them, drive the car. And if it speaks to you, that's a winner. And I really, really enjoy these cars.
Everybody, Patrick Long.
Thank you. Thanks for having me. Thank you, buddy.
You might recognize Pat from his movie recently here, right? Teaching Brad Pitt how to drive a Formula One car, or a Porsche race car, I should say. And,
Just watched that the other night.
that's right. Yeah, it's a great movie.
Let you put that back
So
on.
good. Thank you, Pat. I appreciate it. I think I was really excited that Pat could be here because I think it really adds some context to what you do, right? Because it's not just a gorgeous car that performs well, but I think taking it to that step, and I don't know how many car companies actually do that to the extent that you do it.
Yeah, Pat is very, very humble in his statement about he has a little contribution. He had a major contribution to actually every single model. And I won't actually productionize a car without actually getting Pat's feedback and his sign off. So literally, he sends me 3 pages of 90 bullet points of all these things that he doesn't like. And we have an engineering meeting right afterwards, and we literally cross up everything on that list as much as possible. So,
Peter, how hard is it to execute on his feedback?
Fortunately, I have people in my company that are much smarter than me, and they're able to execute it. So we've, I think, done a majority of what Pat's request is. We can't do 100%, but I would say it's over 90%.
Let's talk about the team. How do you go about finding the right people?
Trial and error. Yeah. We've tried recruiting people and paying them a lot of money to come in, and we have these expectations, and then sometimes they just disappoint us. I think most of the employees that have been successful with us have really been trained and groomed by our company. I haven't been able to find a lot of players where they came in with a fantastic resume and then they actually lived up to that expectation. So I think that's key. And then also those people that come in with these big resumes, ask for this big money, they're constantly hopping around ships. So they might stay for 1 year and then they want another raise and they're not performing. So, there's a lot of loyalty involved with that too. So, we try to groom and train our own staff to be able to do this. Instead of trying to find turnkey people who have the resume but are not necessarily performing up to that resume.
Right.
Yeah.
I asked earlier, go ahead, Tony.
I was just going to ask, are those Gunther Werks wheels or Vorsteiner wheels?
Those are Gunther Werks wheels.
Okay,
Yeah.
nice.
Yeah. They're magnesium and
Yeah,
they weigh 15.9 pounds.
Incredible looking.
Peter, you've got 6 models that are available. I think you're sold out of the coupes, right?
Yeah, we're pretty much sold out of most of our cars.
Okay.
The new slant nose we just unveiled in August.
That's the F26, right?
Yeah, F26, that's also sold out. But
And what's the pricing points on these, like this and the F26, just to give kind of an idea of, because I know each one's customized, right? But ballpark.
this one is somewhere around 1.2.
Okay.
And then our turbo now starts at 145 base price. Optioned out is like 1.6, 1.7, depending on the options. We had a client that just walked in today and he added $480,000 worth of options on top of his base price. So it all depends.
By the way, I have to say, I love the F26. I mean, updating a slant nose is a tall order. To make the car look right, to unify the design. The slant nose has always been kind of a polarizing design, even among Porsche files. But I think you guys nailed it.
Yeah, the internet might disagree. I have people that say that it doesn't look like a Porsche, it looks like a Nissan, or all kinds of
I think it looks
all
great.
kinds of comments. But it is definitely a polarizing car, even for Porsche, and that's why they never mass-produced them. But We did it because it's the most aerodynamically efficient. Because of the shape of the fender and the headlight, makes it as aerodynamic as possible. And because we're building a limited edition 26 units, we're not making 100 of these cars. We felt there was a small niche market where people would appreciate the design and history of the slant nose. And it's got our biggest horsepower drivetrain, where it's got the E85 and it's producing 1,067 horsepower.
That's on the E85, right? Yeah.
So it has a flex fuel system. So if you put regular 91, it only makes 890 horsepower. But if you put the 85, it just automatically bumps it up to 1,067.
Yeah, the system can sense the fuel.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right.
How long, sorry, if I were to come in and order a car from you and walked in and want to place an order, how long does it typically take to actually get that car? Because you've got a pipeline and a lot of cars you're building. What's
About
it?
a year and a half to 2 years.
Okay.
Yeah.
Right. Do you have a waiting list for particular, because you sell out of the cars fairly quickly, right? So I'd imagine.
Yeah, we do have a wait list.
Right.
Yeah.
By the way, how do you select your customers? Because I know you can't just walk into Gunther Werks and put down a deposit.
Well, fortunately.
You host speaker series?
Oh, there you go.
Fortunately, I don't do the customer interviews. My wife does. She's sitting right there on the red, and she's the one that interviews all the clients. And we don't just, approve customers based on financial qualification. We want to make sure that we're going to enjoy working with these customers for a year and a half to 2 years, and that they actually appreciate what we're building instead of they're just trying to buy the newest, shiniest toy or trying to flip the car in an auction. So we try to find clients that are great, brand ambassadors and who appreciate these cars. We don't want these cars in a garage becoming garage queens. It's not a painting, it's a car, and we're supposed to enjoy it.
Right.
And you want your customers, most importantly, to drive them, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Use them as intended.
So question, you were talking about BMWs before, right? And I've heard rumblings maybe that you're going into that space and the more classic BMWs. Is that a thing?
Those plans have been a little bit delayed because we have a lot of orders to catch up on.
Right.
But I have been working on a E30 M3 version of this car, but we're not quite sure whether we're going to productionize it or if it's going to be a one-off.
Right.
But we are making, a Gunther Werks version of a BMW E30 M3.
I want you to share something that you shared with me earlier before we started. The color on this car was kind of a bear for you guys, right? I mean, not just the color, but also the way the paint was laid down. Can you tell that story? This is a candy purple car we're talking about.
Candy purple. So candy is very, very difficult to paint. It's almost like a 5-stage type of paint instead of like a 2 or 3-stage. And I actually tried talking the client out of this paint because my CMF designer suggested this paint. He fell in love with it. But the reason why I like this paint but don't like this paint is because it's not really a driver's paint. Because if you scratch one of the panels, you have to repaint the whole car. You cannot blend the body panel.
There's no way to match it.
Yeah, but I mean, even if you go to a track and you have clear brow on it, if you have a big enough rock, it can penetrate the clear brow. But that's the reason I don't like this paint. But it is a beautiful paint, and the way this paint was made, it's almost like a chrome purple. Right. And because the paint is so reflective, we have to paint this in the dark. So you cannot turn the paint booth on, the lights on. Right. It has to be painted in the dark with a flashlight. And the painter actually has to make sure that he's went to the bathroom, that he had lunch, because this car has to be painted all in one shot. Right. If he took a bathroom break and came back and painted another panel, it would be a different shade. Wow. So there's a lot of prep work involved in it.
So Peter, probably your most prominent competitor in the marketplace is Singer. They do some things quite a bit differently. I'm sure there are similarities, but what are your thoughts on that?
I think the only similarity we have is that we both work on a 911 air-cooled Porsche. That's where the similarity is. After that, everything is completely different. I had a very specific vision and focus on this car. The way this car looks is not because of the design. It was actually engineered first. And so we actually took the chassis and strengthened the factory chassis, and we made the chassis 200% stiffer than the original chassis. And then we mocked up the suspension to make sure that the track width was squared from front to rear, because most 911s have a narrow track. So we mocked up the suspension and the chassis, and then we clay modeled around those parameters. And so the shape fell in because of the performance and engineering requirements. We didn't design the car and then try to work on the suspension and the other functionalities. It's shaped because it's shaped from performance and engineering, and the looks are really just a byproduct of the performance of the car.
I know also that you use a digital wind tunnel. Mm-hmm. Tell us about that process.
Yeah, so unlike Porsche, we don't have like $200 million budget to build these cars, and having a life-size wind tunnel is very, very expensive. Even a lot of F1 teams don't have wind tunnels. You know, they use a quarter-scale wind tunnel. So we have to use a combination of CFDs, computational fluid dynamics, which is essentially a computerized wind tunnel, to simulate the body panels on the car and see if there's downforce and lift and airflows and everything like that. But you cannot just rely on CFD. You have to combine that with actual real-world testing. So we actually track test everything in the physical world.
Has there been a case when the digital wind tunnel testing was actually wrong and it was proven wrong on the track?
There's contradictions. So like even when I went to visit the Red Bull F1 team, they would tell me that they had contradictory data from actual wind tunnel testing and the digital. So you have to combine both. And
but doesn't that could be affected by humidity and wind and temperature and all that, or does that affect that when you're outside? The air's thicker than it would be in that environment.
That could be. There's just so many factors. Like the airflow is such a weird thing. It's a black art figuring out how to do it. That's why people like Adrian Newey are so far and few between who work at F1, because understanding the airflow is not straightforward. What you think makes sense doesn't actually work in real life.
Have you ever taken one of the cars and actually taped telltales to it?
We did.
And
we did that in Willow Springs.
Interesting.
Yeah.
I mean, that's
Like,
the old
that's
school.
The old school way.
Yeah.
We literally have all these.
Right.
Do you guys know what we're talking about? You take little pieces of twine or thread, you tape them all over the car. You've seen this if you've seen the movie Ford versus Ferrari, it shows that process, and they did that at Willow Springs. And based on how those little threads move in the air, you can see where the turbulence is and you can see where the smooth airflow is. How do you source the donor cars? Are there particular models of the 993 that you're looking for? And also, do customers say, I have this car, build me a Gunther Werks car?
So, yeah, that's a good question. Typically, our naturally aspirated cars, like our coupe and speedsters, we ask the customers to try and find the cheapest 993 they can find. But the only requirement is it has to be manual, because we use some of the original components of the manual transmission, and we rebuild it. On the turbos that we have, we also ask clients to find the cheapest 993 they can find, except it can also be automatic because we don't use a transmission.
Another thing, Peter, I know that, so these are old cars now, the 993. Things have moved so far ahead. The new Porsches are so much wider, so much bigger. And yet you have a quad cam 4-liter flat 6 in this car. I mean, it is just shoehorned in there, right? That's got to be a challenge to fit everything.
Yeah, especially in our turbo, that is making 840 horsepower. We have a car that's making more power than a modern day GT2 RS. And, if you look at a 991 or 992, the car has become, much larger. And try and fit all that modern technology into a 993, which is honestly a tiny car compared to a 992. We literally have to fight for every square millimeter of space in this car, and everything is compacted and like it's scanned and pre-plotted so that we maximize the space. It's been a real challenge.
How big is your facility? How many people are working on these cars? Tell us about the operation.
Everything you see on this car, headlights, wheels, carbon fiber seats, steering wheel, is all manufactured in our Huntington Beach facility. The only thing we do not manufacture is an engine, which is done by our partner in Portland, Oregon. But on the turbo, we're actually now making 33% of that motor too. So we essentially design, manufacture everything in-house. We don't rely on outside suppliers. The only outside supplier, I would say the major one, is Porsche Classic parts, because we try to use as many original Porsche Classic parts as possible. But if Porsche doesn't make it, or we feel it doesn't meet our quality control, then we will design and manufacture those parts ourselves. So that's what separates us. We are a vertically integrated parts and car manufacturer, and we have a very small team. We have a team of just under 100 people. So everything is handmade. It takes 4,000 to 5,000 man-hours to build these cars. It's a labor of love.
We can't end this without talking about your partner, Rothsport, and Jeff Gamroth. And how did that relationship come together?
So one day when I had this crazy idea, I was at a rally, and I called Jeff Gamroth, and I said, "Hey, my name is Peter, and I want to know if you can build me a 4-liter air-cooled motor." He's like, "Sure, if you want me to." And I said, "Okay, yeah, I want you to build it." And then we were on the rally, and then I was like, "You know what? I don't think he's taking me seriously. I'm going to fly over there." And at the end of the rally, we flew to Portland, Oregon. I met him for the first time, and I said, "Hey, I'm Peter, and I'm dead serious about building this car. And there's a show 3 months later called Quail in Monterey Car Week." And he's like, "Oh, you're never going to make that. That's only 3 months away." I said, "Trust me, I'm going to make it." So he built us a motor, and we made the show in 3 months. And then ever since then, we've been partners.
Remarkable.
But I would not be here without Jeff, because he's the best air-cooled engine builder. And when I first started this, people did not take us seriously, and he was one of the few people that took me seriously and built the motor for us, and he's been our partner since.
Amazing.
Yeah.
Well, Peter, I love your enthusiasm. You're truly a car guy through and through, and the cars are so impressive. Everyone, Peter Naum from Gunther Werks. Give him a hand.
That's all for this episode of Horsepower Heritage. If you like what you've heard, visit buymeacoffee.com/HP Heritage and become a patron. Also, don't forget about Instagram and the YouTube channel. Got a great new video up on YouTube with some Pebble Beach car stories. I think you'll enjoy that too. Interesting cars and owners. And until next time, I'm Maurice Merrick. Thanks for listening.